Hello, my tormented friends. It's Silent Signs from I Dream of Indie, and today we are taking a look at the Sorrowvirus, a faceless short story.
Why did you kill me?
This is a horror-themed first-person adventure game, and I thought that subtitle was a little bit interesting at first. So if you are anything like me and are unfamiliar with the history, this game was created by the same team that is currently working on a game called Faceless, which is in early development as we speak. Essentially, they created the Sorrowvirus as well as a few other titles that have yet to be released in order to expand upon the universe of Faceless. With that brief history lesson out of the way, let's dive into the story behind the Sorrowvirus. In this game, you are playing as a young man named Wyatt who is given the Sorrowvirus by his parents. Wyatt has cancer, and what the Sorrowvirus is supposed to do is suspend your soul in Purgatory, and while there, Purgatory is supposed to have these healing properties so that when you return back to life, you are cured of your ailments. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem as though the Sorrowvirus is working as intended, as each time Wyatt returns to life, his cancer returns, and it seems to be happening quicker and quicker each time. He also might be losing his grip on reality in the process. Will Wyatt's illness be cured, or will he just descend deeper and deeper into madness? That's what you're playing to find out, and a single playthrough will actually only take you about an hour. This is meant to play as a short story and a short game experience. Because you're meant to play it in a single shot, there are no saves or checkpoints in this title. You are meant to play through until the end, and there are 4 different endings that you can achieve. The alternate endings aren't the only reason to go back in and play again, as the environments will shift a little bit each time you play. You're going to see different notes, hear different recordings, and who knows what else you might find. Examining the gameplay more closely, much of what you're going to be doing is close to what would be called a walking simulator. You are going to be exploring environments, looking for notes and various recordings, as well as symbols, which will transport you to a new location. The rest of your time with this title is either going to be spent searching for items the game requires you to find to progress the story, or looking for a grandfather clock. You actually have to check in with these grandfather clocks periodically because apparently you lose track of time in Purgatory quite easily, and if you lose track of time for too long, bad things can happen. You are able to interact with some objects in a limited capacity, for example, lighting candles or pushing obstacles out of the way, and you have the ability to run and crouch so you can maneuver around these environments. You also may want to avoid the creatures lurking about Purgatory. They certainly don't seem like the friendliest of folks, and a run-in with them can decrease the time you have between check-ins with the grandfather clock, and time is already a hot commodity in Purgatory. Gameplay in the Sorrowvirus is quite simple. It's certainly not the most creative game loop I've ever experienced, but it doesn't have to be. It's really just serving as a means of exploring this super creepy environment. And speaking of environments, let's talk about the graphics a little bit, shall we? This title doesn't look as fantastic as I imagine it would on PC, but they did do a pretty okay job of capturing these worlds via the Nintendo Switch's limitations. There is a fair bit of chugging and frame rate dipping in this title, but they are trying to render this really beautiful, detailed environment on a limited hardware. It did take me out of the immersion a little bit, I'll be honest with you, but I did still appreciate the environments for what they are. I kind of had to just fill in the blanks with my imagination. But technical issues aside, I did love exploring these worlds. I love horror games, and I think this one took some really cool creative risks. Essentially, their vision of Purgatory is compiled from fragments of Wyatt's memories, so places he's been in the past and from all different times in his life, compiled into one twisted amalgam of nostalgia. There are overgrown vines and tendrils twisting about. There are these fire creatures that lurk around every corner, and dead bodies strewn on the floor or just out of reach outside a window. And perhaps the coolest thing is how the environments change before your very eyes, or even just once you turn around, things can be totally different than how you remembered them a second ago. And there are quite a few jump scares. I am not a person who is easily startled, but a few of these even got me. And further adding to the disturbing nature of this title, you have a sound design that was clearly not made in Purgatory, but in Hell. My opinions on the overall sound design are a little bit split, and here's why. The soundtrack is limited. You get really one song for your entire playthrough, which, again, this is a short game, so I guess it's to be expected that you're not going to have a whole lot of variety of tracks, but after playing the game for a little while, the song starts to layer over itself, and not in a cool way like when you were a kid and you would sing row, row, row your boat in a round and it all kind of made sense and sounded pleasing to the ears. This kind of layers in a way that doesn't make sense, and I don't know if it's intentional or not. I can't tell if this is part of Wyatt's descent into madness or if this is just my Switch not being able to handle this game. Either way you slice it, it's not a bad song by any means. In fact, I really liked it. It just sounded a little bit weird. On the other side of the coin, the sound effects and the voice acting are top notch. I thought that the sound effects really added some spooky effects. You hear these footsteps every once in a while that are really eerie and kind of sound like the dolls that you see everywhere just running around with their tiny little doll feet, and that alone kind of made the hair on my arm stand up a little bit. You also have some really agonizing screaming going on and people begging for mercy, and it's really cool. You also have, as I mentioned before, those voice memos to listen to, and they're very well voice acted. They tell the story in a way that made sense to me, at least, and I don't have any experience with Faceless, the game that this is kind of supporting, but I could still piece together what was happening here, which is good. Before I, like Wyatt, lose track of time completely, let me wrap this thing up by saying this is a really cool atmospheric horror title that makes me excited to experience Faceless whenever that is available. However, I do think this would be a more positive experience on a PC if that is an option for you. The Switch just isn't meant to handle a game like this, I don't think. They did their best with what they had, but it's not quite optimized well. That said, even though the Switch performance itself can be quite scary, it did not deter me from going back in several times to get a few of the endings just to see what would happen, because the story was that interesting, and I did love how things changed each time you went in for another round. So will you be losing time with the Sorrowvirus? Let me know in the comments down below. Before I go, I just want to thank our indie warriors, Bill T, Christian Cruz, Kevilo, Adriana Amato, CJR, PSC, Julian Colbus, Jesse, Raylin, Marky Mint, Dave Harp, Peekaboo, Lex Noyle, and King of the Hatch, and our indie legends, Jen Rose, Larkison, Mitchell Hall, Peach, Skeptism, C Coil, Nathan Moore, Chris Jackson, Mr. W, Blue Francis 14, The Beefarinis, Business Cody, and Carmen Red. Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you for watching this video. If you haven't already, don't forget you can subscribe down below so you don't miss any of our reviews or gameplay impressions, and check out the description box if you'd like to see how to become an indie warrior or indie legend yourself. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.